are on the record. I'm 8-Bit Esquire, the presiding officer of the court, calling case number 23-04, the people versus the defendant, professional video monitors. The defendants have been charged with being too overpriced to add to your gaming collection, and in today's proceedings, we'll determine whether it's worth spending your hard-earned money on acquiring a PVM, or whether you're better off just saving your cash and emulating them. Wait, how would you even do that? In order to render a verdict, we'll hear an opening statement, take direct and cross-examination, review some forensic evidence, and listen to testimony from an expert witness. Finally, after hearing all of the evidence presented, I will render my verdict as to whether the defendants are worth buying or only worth emulating. So, without further ado, let's put professional video monitors on trial. If you were born in the 20th century, chances are you fell in love with video games through the use of a cathode ray tube. Analog video signals containing information on color, luminescence, and synchronization are driven from an external source into a vacuum-sealed glass tube, repeatedly spread by 3 electron beams across a phosphorescent screen. These beams are stabilized, balanced, and focused through the use of magnetic coils passing through a metal grill, ensuring that the beams from the electron guns are charging the correct phosphor at the correct time, all moving in a beautiful, sweeping pattern from left to right, top to bottom, in an interlaced fashion, all happening in mere milliseconds, undetected by the human eye. By today's standards, this is ancient technology, but even today in 2023, I can't help but be awed by this complex system and how it works. With so many antiquated components dependent upon one another, working in unison, it's still somehow capable of displaying the beautiful, vibrant imagery we see in our video games, without a hint of latency between the moment we press an input and see its effect on the screen. If you're like me, you will always have reverence for this technology, and despite significant improvements in digital, flat panel displays, I will always prefer to play retro video games on a cathode ray tube. If you're also like me, your love of video games began on something that looks a lot like this. This is a Sony KV-1217, produced in 1980. It features a handsome wood veneer case, an automatic channel tuner, a 75-ohm coaxial input, and a bright, vibrant colored display delivered by Sony's patented Trinitron technology. It, like every other consumer television of its era, could only display signals that were broadcast over the air through a radio frequency. Analog video and audio information were combined and delivered into a single connection, transmitting to your television screen and speakers. Our love of video games began by playing games using the same singular connection, what we refer to as RF. By today's standards, it looks like complete crap, but when I began playing video games in 1987, this was mind-blowing, life-changing. It was what video games looked like. In fact, I played video games through RF for nearly a decade, and by that point, I was only playing Super Mario 64 over composite video on my family's 27-inch Magnavox television in our living room. But this is what playing video games in the late 80s and 1990s was like for most children across the world, and it was phenomenal. Things like geometry and convergence and color accuracy and TV line counts, aperture grills, shadow masks, RGB. We didn't know what any of that crap was, and none of it mattered. We played on crappy consumer grade televisions, and you know what? We loved every single minute of it. But little did we know that in commercial environments, cathode ray tube technology was being perfected at the same time. Security terminals, editing studios, broadcast centers, medical laboratories, professional wrestling. Really, any industry that required durable monitors able to withstand being left on for most, if not all, hours of the day, providing perfect color accuracy with the sharpest video quality available at the time. These monitors, professional video monitors, would cost significantly more than the televisions you and I had in our living rooms at that time, and today, PVMs are one of the, if not the, most sought-after items in the retro gaming community. The history of the cathode ray tube dates back to the 19th century, and in the early 20th century, CRTs served no real purpose other than projecting static images received from a connected camera. The real breakthrough with the technology came in 1929 when a joint venture between RCA Victor and NBC were able to transmit a static image of a Felix the Cat figurine using radio frequencies over the air, while engineers fine-tuned and calibrated experimental TV sets. Within 2 decades, broadcast television became accessible to the masses, with television programming being broadcast in black and white. RCA Victor, who was the global market leader in television production in the mid-20th century, began developing a color television set. One would think that the evolution from black and white to color would be simple, but the introduction of color presented significant challenges to the engineers of the age. With black and white CRTs, the image information isn't being projected onto the screen, it's actually being drawn by a beam striking white phosphors coating the inside of the tube, causing it to illuminate. Think of a tube TV set as a grid. With black and white television, a singular electron gun scans an image onto a screen in an interlaced fashion, drawing all of the horizontal lines on the grid 60 times per second. But the gun strikes only half of the lines with each pass. First, it scans the odd-numbered lines, left to right, top to bottom. Then the beam resets to scan the even-numbered lines. This is done so quickly the human eye can't even decipher the interlaced scans, but if you were to increase a camera's shutter speed, you can begin to appreciate just how hard that little electron gun is working. With a color TV, instead of having one electron beam charging a white phosphor at various intensities, you now have 3 electron beams representing the primary colors of light: red, blue, and green. With color TV, the inside of the tube is coated with red, blue, and green phosphors, which would light when struck at various intensities to create a color image when the 3 phosphors are blended together. The problem comes with ensuring that each beam strikes its assigned color phosphor accurately. In order to make this happen, RCA Victor introduced its shadow mask filter in the 1950s. A shadow mask is essentially a very thin metal plate with tiny holes machined throughout, separating the tiny phosphors coated on the screen. In a shadow mask, the red, blue, and green phosphors are arranged in a triangular shape, appearing as clusters, so that the electron beams at the rear of the tube can be set at different angles so as to not cross one another and distort the image. This approach to creating color television was patented by RCA Victor and widely adopted by the vast majority of TV manufacturers at the time. Chances are your very first experience with a CRT was with a shadow mask filter. In 1953, the joint venture between RCA Victor and NBC resulted in the creation of what would become the color broadcast standard used in North America, much of South America, and Eastern Asia. This standard was regulated by the National Television Standard Committee, or NTSC. The NTSC standard would require all color televisions to draw 525 vertical lines at 60 Hz, or 60 times per second. Because each frame is drawn in alternating or interlaced fields by the electron beams, and because only 480 of those 525 vertical lines were visible on the screen, the NTSC standard became known simply as 480i. Other parts of the world would adopt different standards from NTSC, Most of Asia, Western Europe, Australia, Africa, and some parts of South America adopted the Phase Alternative Line Standard, or PAL. The PAL standard would require 625 vertical lines to be drawn at 50 Hz, or 50 times per second. And because only 576 of those 625 vertical lines were visible on the screen, the PAL standard became known simply as 576i. Which, for purposes of this video, was morally wrong and should be stripped from the annals of history. As you can see from this video here, the PAL version of Sonic the Hedgehog runs much slower than its NTSC version, exemplary of the European work ethic. I mean, really, Spain? A 2-hour lunch break? Really? What the hell do you people do all day? Listen, I've eaten lunch at my desk for the last 12 straight years, and so what if I'm on antidepressants? I have my freedom at 60 Hertz. I mean, look at this. Hey Sonic, do you want to go find some more Chaos Emeralds today? Oh, no. Unfortunately, I'm starting my government-mandated 12-week vacation. Ciao! There was also a third color broadcast standard used in the USSR and France because communism and France, which was CCAM. CCAM was very similar to PAL, but used a slightly different frequency in transmitting color information. Unfortunately, the CIA forbids further communication about CCAM on YouTube, so I think I'll stop right there. Color TV exploded in popularity in the late 1960s, with most televisions using RCA's shadow mask technology. While color television was immensely popular, the shadow mask did present an inherent drawback. The image just wasn't as bright as black and white television, thanks to the metal filter placed in front of the small phosphors coating the screen. In 1968, Sony's introduction of the Trinitron tube brought an all-new approach to color television manufacturing, using its patented aperture grill filter rather than the traditional shadow mask. I'm no engineer, and I'm not about to pretend to be one, so this probably will be an oversimplification. With the shadow mask design, the electron beams are arranged in a triad, but with an aperture grill, the electron beams are arranged horizontally in a linear fashion. The beams are blocked along the tube's x-axis and directed to a vertical opening in the metal sheet. Since the electron gun isn't arranged in a triangular fashion, the phosphors on the tube no longer have to be arranged using dotted clusters. Instead, the phosphors are coated as large strips along the screen. What does all this mean? It means the aperture grill produced a significantly brighter and sharper image when compared to the traditional shadow mask tubes.
I think it's much better. There's good science behind it. More important, there's good sense.
It also affected the way the tube generally looked on the exterior, where Trinitron tubes looked much flatter by comparison, as it was bent only at the x-axis, whereas the y-axis was perfectly straight. A shadow mask tube was bent at both the x and the y-axis, creating a more bubbled appearance. The difference in technology was so distinct, Sony was able to patent the aperture grill, which it named Trinitron, through 1996. For demonstrative purposes, here is my trusty KV1217 Trinitron from 1980 on the left, next to a shadow mask tube manufactured in the mid-2000s. My camera is not doing this shot justice, but the 43-year-old Trinitron is producing a much sharper, brighter, and cleaner image than the much newer shadow mask tube seen on the right. The Trinitron tube was met with universal acclaim and quickly became the gold standard in color television. So much so that the Trinitron even won an Emmy Award for Sony just 5 years after its introduction. Because after all, it's a Sony. That's right. Because of the Trinitron's success and its reliability, Sony began developing monitors that could accept a wide range of video sources for commercial and industrial applications, and could display the various color standards from the NTSC, PAL, and CCAM regions. This would be practically the Swiss Army knife of monitors, able to display literally anything you threw at it to be used in a wide variety of professional settings. Sony had already taken over your living room, and now it wanted to take over your business as well. The earliest professional video monitors used the very same tubes found in Sony's Profil series of high-end consumer televisions introduced in 1980. When compared to later PVM models, the earliest PVMs, like this PVM 1910 here, featured a lower resolution tube, but a wide array of inputs that would accept RGB, composite video, and multiple digital connections from microcomputers. In addition, the earliest PVMs would introduce the ability to output video to external devices, such as additional monitors. As the earliest PVMs are neat novelties and are certainly worth discussion based upon their historical value, they are not going to be the subject of today's video. This video will be focused on professional video monitors of the late 80s through the early 2000s, which feature higher resolution tubes than the televisions found in our living rooms. In addition, this video will not include broadcast video monitors, which were enormous pieces of broadcasting equipment featuring the highest resolutions possible in a cathode ray tube. I'm also not going to discuss broadcast video monitors because, unfortunately, I just can't afford one. Even today, those things cost thousands of dollars. In fact, I've never even seen one in person. I have a 65-inch LG G1 OLED flat panel, one of the best performing televisions on the planet, and it still costs much less to acquire than one of these BVMs. So, sorry guys, I got kids to feed. In addition, this video will feature mostly Sony products because that's all I have, but other manufacturers made some amazing video monitors as well, like JVC, Panasonic, NEC, and Ikegami, all featuring shadow masks and slot masks in their tubes. If you're looking for a great resource in researching different PVM models from various manufacturers, I would highly recommend you check out the CRT database hosted by CRT enthusiast and repairman Andy King. I'll leave a link to Andy's website in the description below. Professional video monitors are some of the best performing examples of the cathode ray technology, and I would even go so far as to say that your retro video games will never look better than when they're being played on a PVM. Let's explore what makes PVMs such a worthy addition to your gaming setup in direct examination. When viewing a PVM next to a consumer CRT set, it becomes readily apparent that PVMs produce a much better image, and this is due to 3 letters that distinguish PVMs from any other ordinary commercial tube. Oh! Yes? RGB. Ooh, good guess, but actually not all PVMs have RGB inputs. Oh, come on! No, what separates PVMs from commercial televisions is TVL, or TV lines. Today we look at flat panel televisions or computer monitors and classify them based upon the number of pixels they can display at their vertical resolution. But in the analog era, tubes didn't have pixels, but rather lines that were being drawn by the electron gun. PVMs all have the same vertical resolution of 525 lines drawn on the vertical axis as commercial tubes, as this was the broadcast standard of the era in NTSC regions, but manufacturers began to produce tubes capable of higher line counts on the horizontal axis for their professional monitors. Yes, this would produce a much sharper image. Most commercial televisions had a TV line count of 300 to 350 TVL. The way that would be measured is by using a static test pattern like this. TVL is the maximum number of alternating light and dark vertical lines that can be visibly counted over the horizontal span, equal to the height of the picture. So in a really simple example, let's say your TV had a 5-inch tube, meaning it was 4 inches wide by 3 inches high. If you were able to count 150 dark vertical lines and 150 light vertical lines over a 3-inch span across the width of the monitor, then your TV has a TV line count of 300. So yes, in sum, PVMs generally have significantly more TV lines on their horizontal axis than their commercial counterparts. Sony would market their highest end PVMs by placing the HR Trinitron logo on the bezel, meaning that particular monitor had the highest TV line count in its product line. In what I believe to be a brilliant marketing move, Sony used HR for horizontal resolution, drawn by What else but the dark and light lines from the TVL test pattern?
Boring.
Excuse me?
Bro, what does this have to do with video games?
Okay, well, when it comes to retro video games, programmers would develop the games to display only 240 lines along the vertical axis, rather than the full 480 interlaced field. This has become known as 240p because only half of the field was being drawn in a progressive scan, leaving half of the screen empty.
Okay, then why does the horizontal axis even matter?
Dude, can I finish? The reason having more TV lines across the horizontal axis matters is because with a higher TV line count, you will have thicker, chunkier, tastier, unbelievably awesome scan lines, creating the authentic 240p look to your games that emulators have been trying to replicate for decades. This is what I would like to call the first C in the holy trinity of the Church of PVMs, clarity. When it comes to 240p content, images are much sharper and much more consistent from the center of the screen to the corners of the screen. This is due in large part to PVMs only being produced in tube sizes from 9 inches to 20 inches. There are some early outliers like the PVM 2530 and 2930, but for the most part, PVM product lines rarely exceed 20 inches. Of course, this is the perfect time to introduce some comparison shots between PVMs and consumer sets. So first, allow me to introduce the highest TV line count PVM in my collection. This is a Sony PVM-20M4U, manufactured in the year 2000. The last entry in Sony's legendary M-series line of PVMs, and the first PVM to offer an 800 TVL tube, the highest line count available in a Sony PVM. In fact, the only way to get a higher line count in a Sony product is to upgrade to a Sony broadcast video monitor featuring 900 to 1,000 line counts. Still, with 800 TVL as you could see here, you can appreciate the scan line thickness sitting several feet away from the screen. And now here's a 600 TV line count tube for comparison. This is the Sony PVM 1942Q, manufactured in 1989. Don't let the age of that monitor fool you though. This monitor has been serviced by my good friend Steve Nutter of RetroTink USA.
Hi, I'm Steve with RetroTink.
Completely recapped and calibrated, and it's still capable of producing a bright, vibrant image. While the 200 line count difference may seem insignificant, a comparison shot between the M4 and 42Q demonstrates a noticeably sharper Sonic the Hedgehog with the tube on the left.
Bro, you could find a consumer set with 800 TV lines.
Yes, you could. Perfect examples are the Sony FV310 or the JVC D series. However, that brings us to a very important topic about line counts. When it comes to line counts and scan line thickness, tube size matters.
Motion in the ocean, brother.
No, really, size matters. Yes, the FV310 and the D series also have very high line counts, but those models featured 27-inch and larger tubes, which not only produce 240p images that aren't as sharp, but also present the likelihood of geometry issues, where the tube cannot produce perfectly straight lines because the electron gun is drawing lines across such a massive field. To further demonstrate, let's compare the 20-inch M4 and 19-inch 42Q to some smaller monitors in my collection. First, we have a Sony PVM 14M1J, a model exclusive to Japan, accepting RGB signals over a 600 TV line tube. Next, we have an OEV 142 by Olympus. This is a medical monitor produced by Olympus, used mainly for ultrasounds and colonoscopies.
Yeah, Dr. Cosmo Kramer, proctology.
But don't let the Olympus name fool you. Inside is the very same 600 TV line Trinitron tube found in the Sony 14M1. Now this is where things start to get interesting. When comparing the 20-inch 800 line tube to the 20-inch 600 line tube, the difference in sharpness was readily apparent. However, when comparing the 20-inch 800 line tube to a 14-inch 600 line tube, the difference really isn't that clear. Sure, the 800 line tube is sharper, but not by much.
Bro, stop with the gatekeeping. You could find some consumer set from the 2000s with component input probably next to a dumpster, and it's going to look just as sharp.
Okay. You bring up a good point. At the end of the last century and the beginning of this century, manufacturers did begin offering better quality signal inputs into their televisions, like S-video and component video. So, yeah, let's compare a PVM to a TV I literally found next to a dumpster. This is the Daewoo DTQ27U4SC, a 27-inch flat commercial CRT manufactured in February 2004. It has component video inputs, and yes, I literally found it next to a dumpster. You know, Daewoo, the original car company for people with bad credit. Daewoo was a South Korean manufacturer known mostly for its automobile production in the late 90s and early 2000s. Daewoo also had an electronics division, which made televisions like this one with shadow mask filters. Out of sheer curiosity, I opened up this television and discovered a tube made by a much more well-known Korean electronics firm, LG. As soon as I turned on this TV, I noticed some really bad geometry issues, and there seemed to be some serious sync issues in the center of the screen. Thankfully, I was able to track down this TV's remote control online to access the TV's service menu, as well as a copy of the service manual. After putting in the service menu code, I was able to access the geometry settings, and I think it helped, I guess. During my gameplay, my adjustments actually made this tube look pretty nice, but this TV likely needs a new set of capacitors, and since I'm ill-equipped to perform that type of maintenance, the imperfections in the tube's geometry will have to remain. Geometry issues are a common problem with larger flat-screen CRTs like this one, and as a rule of thumb, the larger the tube, the more likely you are to see bad geometry. I'll let my friend Andy King explain why that is.
And that's why flat screen tubes have horrific geometry, is because they are very shallow, and then the screen, the front of the screen is flat. And that physics does not work that way. The beams don't want to be shot at an angle onto a flat surface. The curved surface helps to preserve the geometry. So when you buy a flat screen tube, you're buying inferior physics.
So no matter how much I dial in the settings on the service menu, the geometry will never be as good as a standard curved tube. All that said, loading up our friend Sonic the Hedgehog again, the Daewoo does produce a sharp image in the center of the screen, and from a playing distance a few feet away, the set looks pretty nice, but as you begin to look in the corners, it's pretty bad. A completely smudged image, another hallmark of flat screen CRTs. Let's compare this consumer set to the M4 and yikes, not even close. The scan lines are not at all defined, and yes, that really is component video through high-quality HD RetroVision cables for both monitors. The difference in picture quality is night and day.
Shh, bro, you got some massive 27-inch flat consumer tube. Of course it's going to look like crap. I meant find a curved tube with component input from the 2000s. It's going to look awesome.
Okay, so you want a curved tube from this century with component video under 20 inches.
Yeah, that's no big deal.
Okay, that would be an exceptionally rare TV, but I think I might have something for you. This is the Haier HTR13A, a 13-inch traditional curved tube with a shadow mask filter and component video inputs. And yeah, Haier. You know Haier, it's a Chinese electronics manufacturer specializing in home appliances. This TV was manufactured in, get this, 2009. Yeah, 2009. LCDs were in full swing, yet here we are with a tube that's only 14 years old as of the date of this recording. It looks brand new. The colors are bright and vivid, and because it's a traditional curved tube, the geometry is nearly perfect. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that my wife surprised me with this CRT on our anniversary, picking this up for a mere $30 on Facebook Marketplace. And sure, it has a few blemishes and the power button has certainly seen better days, but this is a really nice little CRT. Just in my short time playing with this consumer set, I really love how vibrant the picture looks, even though the colors are off. Maybe it's just a little too blue, but we'll get to that later, I promise. Nevertheless, for a consumer television, this is a really sharp display. While I can't help but love this little CRT, when you compare its 300 TV line shadow mask tube to a PVM, there is just no comparison. The PVM has exceptional clarity, despite this tube being nearly 10 years older than the consumer set.
Dude, no one wants these no-name TVs. Could you believe this guy? Could you believe this guy? He's showing us Daewoo's and Haiers. Bro, I don't want a shitty Korean car or some Chinese dishwasher. What I'm talking about is a consumer Sony Trinitron from the 2000s, under 20 inches with component video input.
Okay, dude. Okay, just to be clear, you want a consumer Trinitron with component input under 20 inches.
Come on, dude, quit whining. It can't be that hard. And you know what? While you're at it, why don't you get me one with an RGB input too?
What? Like, that TV does not exist. It doesn't unless, yeah, that's it. There's like maybe one TV on the planet that checks all of those boxes, and I have it for you right here. This is the Sony KV14DA1, a 14-inch flat Trinitron tube, accepting composite video, S-video, component video, and yes, even RGB. This little television is exclusive to Japan, and as my friends in the UK would say, it's brilliant. Since it's Japanese, component video is accepted through a D-terminal connection, an input used in Japan to accept YPB-PR or component video. In addition, this is a rare consumer television that will accept RGB through Sony's proprietary multi-AV out cable that can connect to the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and even PlayStation 3. Yes, my friends, that's 3 generations of Sony PlayStation, all in glorious RGB. All you need is the VMC AVM250 male-to-male multi-out cable, which is also very rare, and I have that right here too. I was lucky enough to import this television from Japan, and this thing is barely used. It included the manual, the remote, and even still has the factory sticker on the front of the bezel, reminding you to shut off the TV when you're done playing your video games. If you're a PlayStation fanboy, this television is the holy grail. Yes, the menu is entirely in Japanese, but through the magic of Google Lens, I was able to roughly translate the menu and discover the laundry list of options available in this set. You have the standard picture tuning options at your disposal, but check this out. Instead of time-consuming yoke adjustments, here I am adjusting the picture while sitting flat on my ass. I frickin' love this TV. This may sound hyperbolic, but folks, this is the best-looking consumer television I've ever seen. To my eye, it has an incredibly sharp, bright picture with beautiful colors. And no matter what I throw at it, whether it be a 240p PlayStation 1 game or a PlayStation 3 game in 480i, the games are displayed superbly in crystal clear RGB. But that being said, when talking about clarity, this incredible television is still no match for a professional video monitor. The PVM is just sharper overall with well-defined scan lines. So when it comes to clarity, I'm sorry, guy in the comments, but no, a consumer set is just not going to produce as nice of an image as a professional video monitor. The combination of higher TV line counts in the tubes and the better quality hardware components driving the monitor presents significant leaps in clarity in comparison to the televisions we had in our homes growing up. Which brings me to the second C in the Holy Trinity of the Church of PVMs: color. Remember that higher set from a few moments ago? Everything just looked blue when compared to the PVMs, and unfortunately, color correction simply wasn't an available option in the set's service menu. I noticed a similar issue in my Samsung TXR1635, a commercial tube producing an incredibly sharp picture, but yeah, the colors were just wrong. Here's a picture of that little Samsung next to an RGB signal through the RetroTink 5X. The same image is being fed to the consumer tube through an RGB to component transcoder. Blue just seems to take over the image, throwing off the colors on the bottom of Super Metroid's title screen. Now, here's the same signal being fed to the Sony PVM 1942Q. The colors are identical when compared to RGB through the Tink 5X. Simply put, you are just going to get a much truer, more accurate color representation on a PVM than you will on a consumer set. I consulted with color aficionado Keith Rainey about this phenomenon, and in his opinion, the color inaccuracy found in consumer sets is due to, quote, a lot of fuckery, end quote, which is a very highly scientific term. Keith recently had the opportunity to conduct a color accuracy study on a Sony FV310, a very high-quality consumer set, and even in that TV, he noticed the same issues I was having with my consumer sets. Grayscales for red and blue were tracking at a color temperature of 9300 Kelvin, while green was tracking at 6500 Kelvin. All this means is that red and blue was being overdriven by the television in comparison to green, producing a bluish, purplish hue overall. And keep in mind, these consumer sets were intended to be sold in brick-and-mortar retailers, placed next to one another. They were intended to produce bright, vibrant images to attract a consumer's eye in a brightly lit retail space. In addition, these televisions were likely to end up in your living room or bedroom with lots of natural light in it. A bright screen with a cooler color temperature may have been necessary for you to enjoy the images on your screen. By comparison, PVMs were typically used in controlled environments, in low-light settings, and you will get a much more accurate color representation through a professional monitor. A PVM's picture may seem dim compared to a consumer set, but this is because most PVMs feature a light-tinted tube, offering you better contrast in a dark viewing environment. PVMs are ideal for basement dwellers like myself with freakishly pale skin. So if you try to use a PVM in a room with a lot of natural light, you may find the image getting easily washed out. To combat this issue, some PVM owners have resorted to painting their tubes with window tint. Yes, the very same window tint used by drug dealers driving really sick cars, usually Dodges. Please be advised that these PVM owners are fucking insane and should not be trusted under any circumstances. I mean, dude, just go buy a blackout curtain on Amazon. What in God's name are you doing? John Linneman, stop painting your screen. Stop it. Moving on. The last C of the Holy Trinity of the Church of PVMs is customization and compatibility.
Bro, that's 4 C's.
Yeah, but, you know, PVM owners are cults and religions are cults, and you got Trinity and Trinitron, you got the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Look, you need to have 3 for the joke to work.
Yeah, but it's 4.
Just go away, dude. Just go away.
Fine, this video sucks anyways. Dude, this guy's got an update on the next Nintendo Switch, and he's making some goofy face on his thumbnail. That's awesome. YouTube's the best.
Anyway, yes, customization and compatibility. PVMs will take almost anything you could throw at it, depending on the model, of course. Composite and S-Video are staples of virtually every PVM, and most will accept RGB through BNC connectors. Later models like the Sony M series, L series, and late Q series will accept component video through the use of BNC to RCA adapters. PVMs will also accept sources from whatever region you want to throw at it, whether it be NTSC, PAL, even CCAM, so long as the signal is at 15 kHz. The last PVM ever made, the Sony L5, would even accept 480p at 31 kHz. Some of the high-end BVM line of monitors can even accept high-definition signals at a 16:9 aspect ratio. Granted, you need to spend the GDP of Grenada to acquire one, but it's there if you want it, I guess. In addition, PVMs offer the user incredible flexibility in customizing the display in terms of color and geometry that is simply not offered in consumer sets. In most PVM models, you can simply access these advanced service settings in the on-screen menu. In addition, you can simply switch the color temperature on the fly. Older units, like my 1942Q, don't have an on-screen menu, but color temperature settings can be adjusted with a physical switch on the back of the monitor. Geometry settings can be adjusted using small potentiometers on the rear of the monitor's main motherboard. While this is a pain in the ass to adjust, some repairmen believe that you're able to dial in more accurate geometry settings this way in comparison to a digital adjustment in an on-screen menu. And with that, the Holy Trinity of the Church of PVMs is complete. Let us take a moment and give praise to the PVM. Thank you, Lord PVM 20M, for you, for the blessings you have bestowed upon my life. Thank you for your clarity, color, customization, and compatibility forever and ever. But really, let's not overlook the main reason you want to buy a professional video monitor.
The Flex.
Ah, yes, the Flex is back and it's in full effect. What better way to show off how much of a sophisticated retro gaming connoisseur you are than acquiring a professional video monitor? Absolutely nothing else will give you immediate clout on social media and even a possible retweet from the CRT bot than a photo of your prized monitor flanked by yet another monitor or another monitor. Dude, get your fucking cat off that BVM. You fucking cats. However, please be advised that there is a bell curve of douchebaggery when collecting and displaying your monitors. A small number of PVMs in a social media post will gradually increase your clout, but once you reach a certain apex, you've now descended into that guy territory. Like Bob from Retro RGB here. I mean, look at this guy. He's making up for having a lack of something, if you catch my drift. Listen, you just don't want to be that guy, so collect and display in moderation. Obviously, professional video monitors offer an exceptional visual experience when playing your retro video games. If one were to only consider all of the benefits they offer, then it's a no-brainer to pick one up for your setup. However, there are some downsides inherent with PVMs, and we'll cover those in cross-examination. There are many reasons to buy a professional video monitor, but they are not without their drawbacks. If you're doing your gaming in a large space away from the display, a PVM may not be right for you. Like I said, these monitors were designed to be used in commercial settings where the user would be close to the screen, so you're not going to be finding large tube sizes. Most PVMs are generally around 14 inches, with larger sets at 20 inches. Unless you're scouring the internet for an extremely rare PVM 2930, larger sets are far more common in commercial televisions. Much of direct examination was spent discussing the clarity advantage PVMs have against commercial sets due to their increased TV line counts. And sure, PVMs display much thicker, defined scan lines, but the farther you sit away from the screen, the less you'll appreciate the difference in clarity. As you'll see here, I've placed the 800 TVL 20M4 next to the 600 TVL 1942Q, and when sitting about 5 feet away from the two monitors, I couldn't tell the difference between the two. Keep in mind, the M4 costs significantly more than the 42Q. I placed the same 800 TVL M4 next to a 500 TVL Sony PVM 14N6J. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know this monitor as the Penny PVM because I literally only spent 1 cent to acquire this monitor at an auction. And if you don't follow me on Twitter, what the hell, dude? It's free. It's free. Anyway, I sat back at the same 5-foot distance between the two monitors, and I guess the 800 line M4 looked a little better? Maybe. But it wasn't a drastic difference despite the 300 TVL gap. Certainly not worth the significant price difference between those two monitors. And in comparing the 20M4 to that beautiful KV14DA1, I mean, sure, the colors on the consumer Trinitron are off, but look how bright the screen is in comparison. And yes, the M4 looks sharper even at 5 feet away, but is it really that noticeable? So yes, the farther away you sit from these monitors, the difference in clarity becomes less obvious. And if you plan on playing your PVM from the sofa in a very large room, far away from the screen, this may deter you from acquiring a PVM. Another disadvantage of owning a higher line count tube is the way it displays interlaced signals. You see that flicker there? Get used to that. You have to understand commercial televisions were not designed specifically for 240p video games. They were designed to display television broadcasts at 480i. With a low TV line count at, say, 300 lines, the scan lines are faint and you can barely notice them, even when you're close to the screen. Because the scan lines aren't as defined, the alternating fields are drawn closer to one another, meaning there's no noticeable flicker on the screen. On a PVM, the higher the line count, the more obvious the flicker becomes at 480i because the scan lines are thicker. If you only want to play 240p content on a PVM, then great. You'll never have to worry about the flicker, but if you intend to play 480i video games that have static images on the screen, you're going to see a lot of noticeable flicker. And if that drives you crazy, a PVM may not be right for you. Or you may want to purchase a lower line count monitor like the 500 TVL Penny PVM so you can have the best of both worlds. However, with 480i content with a lot of movement, like movies from a VCR, Laserdisc, or DVD player, the flicker isn't really all that noticeable. Here, the 20M4 is placed next to the KV14DA1, a consumer tube, and neither demonstrate any flicker during the action from this clip of Transformers the movie. So really, if you have any concerns about flicker with 480i content, just know that it's only the most noticeable with static screens. Oh! I wonder what happens to Optimus Prime. He'll be fine, I'm sure. If you're an audiophile, PVMs are not your friend. This is not a Bang & Olufsen set with big stereo speakers and massive woofers that look phallic. No, PVMs have very small mono speakers at the bottom of the monitor, which give you bare bones sound quality. As a result, if you're going to be gaming on a PVM, you'll have to split your console's audio to an independent set of speakers or your home stereo. If you're going to use desktop speakers, you'll have to find speakers which are magnetically shielded. Otherwise, you'll interfere with the monitor's magnetic deflection yoke, distorting the image. Retro RGB did a great video on this topic, and I've left a link in the description below. Finally, the biggest reason to not acquire a PVM is the cost. These things aren't cheap, and yes, I did acquire a monitor for only 1 cent, but it still cost me $150 to ship. So let's explore just how much it will cost you to acquire a PVM in forensic evidence. Now, if you're new to this series, normally I take the time to explore price trends I see online to give you an approximate price you would expect to pay for today's defendant. But today I'm going to do something a little different. Today I'm actually going to call an expert witness for this segment, someone who constantly has his finger on the pulse of PVM price trends, calling Steve Nutter. Steve is the owner of RetroTink, a CRT repair business based out of his workshop in Virginia, and he's the creator of the RetroTink YouTube channel, where he's put together some amazing videos and live streams of some beautiful PVMs, BVMs, and consumer CRTs being restored to their former glory. You could also catch Steve co-hosting the Cathode Ray podcast with Zez Retro, a former witness on this very channel. With all that said, Mr. Nutter,
Look, can we go ahead and get this thing started already?
can you please raise your right hand? Could you take the sunglasses off?
You mean
Could you just try to take this seriously? Maybe?
okay?
Thank you.
Should I get sworn in? Put my right hand on the CRT.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, or nothing but the truth?
I do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me, Sony.
Steve, with your experience and expertise, please tell the jury just how much it'll cost to acquire a PVM at various sizes and TV line counts.
All right, so the short answer is it's going to cost a lot most of the times. If you start breaking down PVM pricing, for example, you can do so in the size category, and it starts really at the 8/9-inch size, and you can get something in the lower line count, which would be 250 TV lines, something like an 8041Q, and that's going to generally run you about $400 for a certified working unit. And then if you move up to the next category, they do have a higher resolution or TV line count monitor, and that is the 8045Q. And that monitor will go up to 450 TV lines, but you're going to pay a bit extra as those tend to draw about $600 US each for a known working one. But if 8 inches is just too small for you, you can move up to the 13/14-inch category, but these do cost quite a bit more, as the starting entry point is generally $500 to $600 to get one of these 13-inch PVMs that will do RGB. I will give you a little tip. Keep an eye out for the medical units. They tend to have really good quality tubes, and they offer a nice set of inputs, including an extra input, which you can generally use for RGB or components. So you have two inputs for that higher resolution video. Something like a 14M2 MDU is a great CRT in that category, for example. Now, if you move up in TV line resolution, you're going to get into a Sony PVM 14M4U or even the 14L5 unit, but then you're getting up into the category of spending $800 to $1,000 on a CRT that's 13 inches. But hey, if you really want to spend a lot of money on a CRT, you can go up to that 20-inch/19-inch category. And you're going to start off with that 500 to 600 TV line resolution. But if you want RGB support, you're going to end up spending on average about $1,000 for a known working 20-inch PVM. Now again, you can still try to get better value by going after some of the medical units, and then if you move on up from there, you can go to a 20M4U or other BVMs in the 20-inch variety and get that higher resolution tube all the way up to 1,000 TV lines, but you're going to pay upwards of $1,500 or more for a great, good-looking, high-resolution 20-inch CRT in the United States. So there's one final category, that's the Grail level CRTs. And we're talking about these really high-end CRTs, something like a Sony FW900 or even the Sony BVM D32-inch CRT, which is a CRT that can do 240p all the way up to 1080i video. And it's a 32-inch widescreen Trinitron CRT with 1,000 TV lines of resolution. But something like that is going to set you back $6,000, $7,000, heck, even $8,000 sometimes, depending on how the market conditions are. All right, the last thing I really want to reiterate in my testimony is that my pricing does not include serviced or restored refurbished units. If you find a refurbished unit, it could demand a much higher value depending on the restoration that's been done to it and the records that are with that CRT. So just like a classic vehicle that has a lot of good history with it and good documentation, and then you can obviously tell that it's been through a restoration process professionally, those can command much higher dollars, and those restoration processes can cost from the hundreds to thousands of dollars depending on the complexity of the CRT monitor. So something that's in the higher PVM to BVM range that's been fully restored, that can add significant value and significant cost to the price of the CRT.
Mr. Nutter, thank you very much for your testimony. You may now leave the witness stand. Now, because I only play games on original hardware, I don't know much about how well you can emulate the PVM experience. Hashtag emulation is for quitters. Yeah, wait a minute. How am I even going to do this segment? You can't emulate a PVM like you can a game or a video game console. Like, who would I even call for
Get to the chopper!
Oh, hey, it's the RetroTink 5X.
What do you mean you can't emulate a PVM? What the hell do you think I've been doing for you the last 2 years?
Okay, yeah, that's true. My mistake. With your advanced scanline filters, you do a great job of emulating PVMs.
Yeah, I've got more inputs than your mother at a bachelor party.
Whoa, Tink 5X, what the hell? And why are you talking with a bad German accent?
I used to speak with a Southern California accent, but ever since Mike Chi programmed PAL settings into me, I talk like this. Lick min Schwagel, get down!
Wow, okay. Well, that's really unfortunate.
You're unfortunate. Your mama's so nasty, she got kicked out of a Red Lobster for bringing in her own crabs.
Excuse me? Tink 5X, this is a court of law.
A court of law? You think this is a court of law? You're some loser talking about old TVs in his basement. No one's gonna watch your stupid video. I'm so not surprised you're such an idiot. Your mother's so dumb, she skipped learning her ABCs and went straight into guessing STDs.
Whoa. Oh, okay, this is getting ugly.
You're ugly. Your mother's so ugly. Men have to wear blindfolds when they sleep with her.
Okay. I've really had enough of this. Is this all you do? You just sit around and tell bad yo mama jokes?
Yeah. Your mother's like a freezer. Men like to put their meat inside of her.
Tink 5X, does your father know about what a huge ass you are?
Your mother has a huge ass. Your mother's so fat, she has more chins than a Chinese phone book.
Whoa, hey, that's pretty racist. It's like also the oldest yo mama joke in the book.
Your mother's so old, her chest looks like 2 upside down sorting hats from Harry Potter.
Okay. Well, can you just go get your dad?
Get to the chopper! Get down!
Oh, hey, it's the RetroTink's creator, Mike Chi. One good thing he had to say was that the RetroTink 5X, the best analog to digital video scaler available on the market today, can emulate the PVM experience. And you, the owner of RetroTink LLC and creator of the RetroTink 5X, may know a thing or two about how well we can emulate PVMs. So, with all that said, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do solemnly swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, and the whole truth, so help me, Kazumi?
Mike Chi, could you please tell the jury about just how well the RetroTink 5X can emulate the PVM experience, and what we can expect with PVM emulation in the future?
So that's a good question. And before answering your question, I feel like I have to constrain it a little bit. Because just like emulating video games, emulating PVMs, there's always degrees of accuracy and what degree of accuracy the user wants. For example, with video games, right? Some people, they're purists, they only want the original hardware and with all its quirks, and nothing is going to replicate the experience of the original hardware from plugging in the cart to playing it on a CRT. Whereas someone else might be okay with FPGA emulation because there's no lag. Others might be great with cycle-accurate emulators on a high-end PC, and then you've got people that are fine with Nesticle on a 486. So I think we really have to constrain it because, likewise, you're never going to fully emulate a CRT with anything but a CRT. With that in mind, I would cautiously say that the Tink 5X can successfully emulate a PVM or a high-end consumer tube. What I think most gamers are looking for with the CRT look is a level of blurring as well as the texturing from the shadow mask. And the blurring and the texturing adds a degree of interest and a degree of extra detail to these low-resolution graphics that most of us find aesthetically pleasing, whether or not it's due to nostalgia or just because it is actually flattering to the artwork. There's many opinions on it, but I think with the scanline effects on the Tink 5X, you can get pretty close because the Tink 5X can create the shadow mask, which creates that structure, as well as create the blur from the scanlines. And the Tink 5X is also able to take it a bit further by actually emulating the variance in the scanline width as the intensity changes. So if you combine all that from a distance, regular gaming distance, you're focusing on the game and not necessarily taking screenshots, you do broadly have the aesthetic effect that you're looking for with a CRT. Now, is it perfect? No, it's not. If you get up close, you'll obviously see that there are differences between the emulated CRT and a real one, and that's partially due to both the limitations of flat screen display technology, as well as how the Tink 5X is able to render it. If we want to go one step further, the Tink 4K can take that a bit with a bit more detail, because at 4K you have more resolution, so your masks can get more detailed, and you can create the slot mask effect or better aperture grills along with the individual RGB stripes. So that does give you an extra degree of realism. The Tink 4K also has a real HDR mode that's better than the Tink 5X's fake HDR because the Tink 4K can do the color correction. So that basically gets you the lost brightness that that people don't like when they have scan lines on a flat display, because you're blackening out parts of the screen, you lose brightness. Well, the Tink 4K's HDR mode can restore some of that brightness without distorting the color accuracy. So with the Tink 4K, you do get a little bit closer, but as before, I still have to kind of qualify it by saying the intended use, and when I say it can replace it, it's for a gamer at a normal gaming distance focused on the gameplay that wants to broadly recreate their aesthetics. If you go deeper in the proverbial rabbit hole, you're never going to replace a CRT with anything except a device that's shooting electron beams at a phosphor on glass. And I think I'd like to end by saying, is there room for improvement? And I'd say yes. As displays get brighter, I think, and with more high resolution, I think we'll get ever closer. Will it replace it? Probably not.
Mr. Chi, thank you very much for your time. You may now leave the witness stand. Professional video monitors have been charged with being too overpriced to add to your gaming collection. Are they guilty or innocent of this charge? After reviewing all of the evidence, I have reached a verdict. It is this court's verdict that professional video monitors are not guilty. Yes, the RetroTink 5X can almost recreate the PVM experience, and the upcoming RetroTink 4K gets us even closer to emulating a PVM. But it's just not the same. And you really have to see it to understand why. And also, you can't play Battle Clash on your flat screen, so try harder, Mike Chi. If you're looking for the best examples of clarity, color, and customization and compatibility in your analog retro video games, then you are certainly in the market for a professional video monitor. That said, should you rush right out and spend 4 figures on the biggest PVM you could find with the highest TV line count? Not exactly. While there's no denying these high TVL monitors are incredibly sharp and brilliantly display 240p games, they do display that annoying flicker with 480i games, and keep in mind, a smaller, cheaper 14-inch monitor with either 600 or 500 lines can look almost just as good for only a few $100. Or, in my case, just a penny. While I recommend purchasing a PVM, keep in mind that with a little fine-tuning and maintenance, you can make a crappy consumer CRT, literally found next to a dumpster, look like $1,000,000. When it comes to CRTs, there's really no wrong way to play your games, even if it's on a 43-year-old wood grain set over RF. Because remember, the best CRT is the one that you own and the one that works. That concludes our trial today. Join us next time for case number 23-05, The People versus the WWF on the Sega 32X. I'm 8-Bit Esquire, and until next time, court is adjourned.